Anyway. Call to order work session, Goodyear City Council, Monday, April 13. All items listed are for discussion only. No action can or will be taken. All of the council members are in attendance. We have one item on our agenda for the work session, and the council meeting will start at 6. For this work session, we have one item, and that's a use tax presentation to Mayor and Council, and John Fischbach will lead us off.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. We have this evening with us Joe Leondowski, who is our sales tax auditor, who will talk to you about the use tax for the city. We reviewed this a couple of weeks ago with the council, and the fact that the city does not have presently a use tax, and the fact that most cities around us do. And so we were talking about it from an equity standpoint and something that we should take a look at. It will form part of the basis of our budget presentation on the 23rd, or excuse me, the 21st. So we are slowly building up to that presentation. With that, I'll ask Joe to review this whole concept with you, and we'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you. Joe?
Okay. Tonight I'll summarize for you. We're going to cover is what is use tax, the neighboring cities that have a use tax, common situations when it might be due, give you some example of purchases from out of state, purchases from unincorporated areas, who's responsible to pay use tax, what are the benefits to Goodyear, how do we ensure compliance or enforce, how do we notify individuals, and then finally some questions if you have questions at the end, or you could ask as we go along. Use tax. We're going to go over what is use tax. I'll give you the definition. It is tax on tangible personal property which is purchased for use in Goodyear or inside the city limits, on which a city sales tax was not paid at the time of purchase.
You take the questions as you go along?
Sure. Absolutely.
What about purchases that are made on internet purchases, eBay? Do we have any type of
Prohibited by federal law.
Joe can address that.
I'll address that. It's not a use tax issue, but basically, if you make a sale, a business, and you make a sale in Arizona, and you are a Goodyear business, and it doesn't matter how you make the sale. The internet is only non-taxable for fees, subscriber fees. If you sell tangible personal property and you advertise or sell over the internet, it's still a taxable transaction. The only thing that is exempt is the access fees, like AOL fees or Cox fees, stuff like that.
But making the collection is impossible. So.
Correct.
a lot of our sales go out of the city basically because of several entities that are online. And,
Right. Arizona is basically a point of sale, not destination. What that means is that if the business is located inside the city limits of Goodyear and it goes to a resident of Arizona, it's a taxable transaction to Goodyear.
Resident of Arizona.
Right. And if it's an out-of-state sale, obviously it would be exempt from taxation. But we're point of sale, not destination, so it's where the business is located, except for contracting, of course.
all right, let's go a step further on that basis. We're talking about Macy's, that's headquartered here, distribution center. Purchases are really basically made online to Macy's. And that product then, that merchandise then is sent to the buyer.
Correct.
All right, now explain why we can't tax that.
We currently, it is a taxable transaction. So as long as it goes to an Arizona resident or an Arizona location, and it is made from inside the city limits of Goodyear, wherever that goes, it's taxable to the city of Goodyear.
But if that product goes to California, it's non-taxable.
Right. It's an exemption because it's an out-of-state sale, correct.
Thank you.
Some of the neighboring cities that have a use tax, Avondale, Litchfield Park, Peoria, City of Maricopa, Glendale, El Mirage, and the subsequent rates are
3%.
Now, to give you some common situations, most of the common situations where use tax is due are purchases from out-of-state vendors or vendors not located in incorporated Arizona city or town coming in. and I will give you some examples. The most common one, you have cars, boats, wave runners, RVs. For example, a Goodyear resident purchases a car from a dealer out of state. The dealer charges no sales tax. The buyer must pay use tax on the total purchase price when he returns to the city of Goodyear and registers the vehicle. And currently, the state already obviously has a use tax, and when you register the vehicle at MVD or motor vehicle, the state will collect a state use tax at that time. And then after that, they take the information and they forward it on to the Department of Revenue, and they follow up on behalf of the program cities. And if it's a non-program cities, then they just forward the information to them.
So we are a program city, so they would follow up for us if we had a use tax. And Joe will review with you how many sales there have been that we're aware of.
But if I bought a car in Avondale and paid the Avondale 2% tax or 1% tax, I would not be, are you getting into that? Or-
I could, but the question is, if you purchase a car in Avondale and paid
Yeah,
local
if I paid
tax.
another city tax in Maricopa County, I'm not going to get taxed again when I bring that car into the city of Goodyear.
No, you're not. No. It's, we're the tax collector, or the city would be satisfied that you paid local tax somewhere.
Right.
The next example is if you have a business inside the city and they purchase office equipment, furniture, a pizza oven, computers, from an out-of-state vendor who does not charge them sales tax, then use tax must be paid on these items. And businesses are aware of that because they currently have to report to the state use tax on those items.
And you actually get calls from people wanting to pay use tax.
A number of calls, the businesses want to actually report and pay because they know there's a use tax, and unfortunately I tell them at this time we don't have one, but they need to report to the state also, so, yeah. A couple calls a week wanting to report that.
What about
Yes.
our hospitals? Millions of dollars in equipment. Wasn't this an incentive for some businesses to locate here in purchasing?
For hospitals or healthcare organizations, they would be exempt from privilege tax anyway. There's a specific exemption for healthcare facilities,
Okay. So if they-
nonprofit healthcare facilities.
A
Well,
nonprofit?
West Valley is a for-profit.
I believe so,
And
yes.
so CTCA. So they would not be
So if they're
exempt.
buying a $5 million MRI machine, they're going to have to pay a 2% use tax on that?
Correct, if we had one, correct, yes. If they didn't pay tax on it at the time of purchase.
We need to, okay.
And the next example would be, I have a new business opening a location in Goodyear. All the equipment was purchased out of state and no tax was paid. They have the equipment shipped directly to the new location. There's a number of the calls that I've been getting, and use tax would be due on this equipment. And businesses actually expect to pay because the number of calls, I'm not saying there's 50 every day, but there's 2 or 3 a week that actually want to pay and, send the money in, so.
Let's see, if a company like Macy's were to buy conveyor equipment, which arrives as personal property but later becomes real property, I would think, would they, if they were in one of these other cities, pay a use tax on that?
If they were in another city and no tax was paid and it meets some of the criteria and there's no exemption, correct, yes.
So that was a benefit for Macy's and, what's the other one, Amazon.com then?
Yeah, if they purchased all this stuff out of state and brought it in, absolutely, yes. The next example is from unincorporated areas. The example I have is manufactured homes. I don't know if you're ever aware of that. If someone purchases a manufactured home, a Goodyear resident, and they purchase it from a county island where there's no city sales tax, the buyer must pay use tax on the total purchase of the manufactured home when it's installed in Goodyear. Currently, I just thought I'd mention that there's only 3 places that allow manufactured homes. But if you notice, they all are outside the city limits, and they know that. That's why they're there. So it could be any dealer. It doesn't have to be a manufactured dealer. It could be an RV dealer.
But if they're manufactured here in Goodyear and they're sold, well, of course, they don't put them in Goodyear. They go to a county island. Do they pay a tax?
They do. If the business is located inside the city limits and it's a retail transaction, the money would go to Goodyear, no matter where it's going. Point of sale.
We do
Is
have,
this in the city of Goodyear, or is this manufacturing, it's in a county island yet? We've never taken that in?
The next slide will identify who pays use tax or needs to report it. Individuals on purchases over $1,000. What that means is purchases under $1,000 each item are exempt from paying use tax. That's from the Model City Tax Code. So as an individual, if you went on the internet and you purchased a TV for $995, that transaction would be exempt from use tax because they're exemption for $1,000. Yes.
Car dealers. The car is manufactured in Detroit to a dealership here. Okay, it's sold here. Tax?
Car manufacturers left in Detroit.
If it comes here and it's on the lot and somebody purchased it here, then it would be taxable to Goodyear, correct? If they purchased it from Detroit and it came directly here, then there was no tax paid. We don't have a use tax, so there would be none collected. Because it's a use tax situation, there was no tax paid, it comes from out of state.
Gotcha.
And the other one is all businesses are required to pay use tax on their untaxed purchases of tangible personal property. This does not include items purchased for resale or inventory items.
Okay, question. And this may need to go to someone in ECDEV. Has this, in a sense, incentive that the city doesn't have a use tax ever been used to bring in businesses as just part of a statement of saying Goodyear doesn't have this? Can anybody answer that?
Harry?
While he's walking up here, Eddie, you might note, we lost one of our screens, if he's listening.
The use tax really hasn't been much of a discussion. Not to say that, all the taxes are not considered when businesses decide to come to a location, but it has not been much of a discussion in terms of negotiation.
So it could have been an actual extra highlighted item that could have been used then.
I would imagine definitely the detail that companies go through when they look at locations, they will look at all the different taxes that are involved in locating in the community. Is this a location decision for them?
No.
Yeah. It's one of those things that they would probably look at, but I don't think it's going to be one of those location decisions for them.
Thank you.
Thank you, Harry.
To that point, though, the reason I brought that up earlier, the question that I brought up was exactly to Joanne's point, and I recall having a conversation, you and I sidebarred here just a second ago, but recalled having a conversation with CTCA about this, about them warehousing stuff here and then distributing it to the rest of their facilities, and there was some incentive for them to do that. And so I wouldn't want to adversely impact a company to the tune of millions of dollars potentially. Because they're not dealing in $1,000, $2,500, $25,000 items. They're dealing in 7-figure, 8-figure, 9-figure items potentially that it sounded like they were warehousing through their facility here in Goodyear.
How are they structured? As a not-for-profit?
No, they're for-profit.
Let me interject real quick because
First,
it is,
understand
if it was passed, it would be prospective and not retroactive.
Right, but it's
So
important for us to understand that, especially to communicate that with one of our biggest stakeholders in terms of the business world right now within the city of Goodyear, and make sure we're engaging them in this dialogue, whether that's through the council or whether that's through staff. Somebody needs to double-check, triple-check, and make sure we're not adversely impacting folks through this decision that we think is going to raise $250,000 and in turn might, do double, triple, quadruple that.
That fits for the hospital, as the West Valley Hospital as well. Because,
Yeah, West Valley Hospital
'cause
and CTC.
They're a profit, and they bring in these huge Da Vinci robots to do medical procedures. So
Don't you
Big
remember
dollars.
having some dialogue about this?
I do recall there was a provision, I don't know if it made it into the agreement, but there were some concerns about that. And I'm just going to have to review the document and take a look at it.
Well, and I guess that's my point is this possibly, if it's small potatoes at the end of the day that we get from a use tax compared to an actual selling tool that we just haven't put out there enough, that's what I'm wondering. Apples to apples, where does it really equal?
We'll take a look.
Okay, let's talk about the benefits to the city of Goodyear. It promotes fairness to local businesses. The tax is designed to eliminate the unfair tax advantage of business located outside the city or outside the state may have over an in-city business. I'll give you an example of the automobiles. I have factual data from the Department of Revenue where we have 53 purchases of automobiles made by Goodyear residents from out of state. Basically, the loss to the city was estimated at $20,000, not estimated, but pretty close, and which translate into almost $1 million in lost sales to businesses of Goodyear. So the information comes from DOR. That means these people registered with the MVD, paid the state use tax, and then, of course, no city use taxes due. That's just out-of-state vehicles. That's just one stream. And that was information from January '08 to October of '08.
You said it was 20,000?
Is that both? Is that both used and new vehicles?
Yeah, it doesn't matter if it's purchased from a dealer. Correct.
I mean, from a dealer.
Correct. New and used, correct.
And if it's a used vehicle purchased from a dealer in, say, California, and it's brought in here, that tax, city doesn't get any share of that tax that's paid to the state.
Well, through shared revenues.
Very indirect.
Very indirectly, yeah.
Well, through shared revenue.
We wouldn't recognize it as such.
Okay, number two, it actually safeguards local sales tax revenue because it imposes a tax in a situation when no sales tax was paid at all. Finally, the third one, we talk about additional revenues, and the estimate is $250,000 per year based solely on a minimum estimate because really there's no way of telling because of the information. I do get reports from DOR that I do know that a lot of businesses do report use tax, but we don't get the information because we don't have a use tax. So we can tell by the reporting codes. In comparison, I surveyed 3 cities. Peoria actually collects over $500,000 a year in use tax. Avondale's $247,000. Litchfield Park's $146,000. These are actual numbers from '08.
You got to realize with Avondale, they've got a tremendous amount of automobile dealership.
Yeah, but this is use tax that has nothing to do with the sale of automobiles in Avondale. This is above and beyond.
I'm talking about the amount of money that they collected, which is, to me, I would say, would be a lower figure.
That's just on the purchase of people who went outside the city and didn't go to the local dealers. That's outside the city.
That's if somebody comes to Yates and buys a car and brings it into Avondale. They're collecting the tax on.
Basically, that's Avondale residents going outside the state, and then, I mean, it's more than just cars. It could be other things also.
Does the county charge a use tax?
No, they do not. And how would Goodyear ensure compliance? Currently, we are a program city Department of Revenue, which means obviously they collect on our behalf. And they do have numerous programs. One we mentioned was the motor vehicle MVD. Game and Fish is another program where if anybody registers a boat, Wave Runner, they have to contact DOR and make sure the tax was paid. And also customs. They have a customs information that comes from the federal government. So those are some of the various sources of Department of Revenue. Another one is the county. They get information about businesses every year regarding their fixed assets. And we have other sources, external and internal. We have other cities, internet, individuals. Information comes from other states. And that's the advantage of the program city. The department gets information from other states also.
How do you figure the amount of time be spent on administering this program from our staff standpoint?
We would be able to do it, obviously, with the existing staff because we are a program city and the Department of Revenue will work on our behalf, collecting those 3 items that we mentioned for MVD, Game and Fish. So it would be pretty much transparent.
How many people in your department that are doing this? Just yourself? Or
Myself and Tina, 2. Mhm.
Okay.
How do we notify businesses and residents? Number one, we would have tax workshops as we did previously for contracting and retail. We have separately, one for business, one for individuals. The next one would be through the mail. Currently, any changes made by program cities, the Department of Revenue notifies the whole tax base. And then obviously, we would take our part and advertise in the In Focus, West Valley newspapers, any publications. We would update or create brochures, handouts, and explain the use tax. And via the internet, we'd make sure all our information was updated on the internet, as well as DOR or Department of Revenue would have it on their site also.
I have a question. So, last year, for example, I had to buy a very expensive piece of equipment out of state. And sometimes you will see on invoices, they'll show a tax rate. They'll show the cost of the item, and they'll show a tax rate. And actually, I guess I shouldn't have said out of state, because sometimes this also works with just a different city, correct? So if it shows just a base percentage, you really don't know as a business person whether or not you've paid under or over what Goodyear's tax is. Do you know what I'm saying? So that's coming back down to how, I'm just trying to figure out how this all works out. So that comes down to how the Department of Revenue sees it when you've put in your tax returns. Is that an equipment purchased? Is that how it works?
Yeah, they don't, I mean, they don't review every tax return, reported. In the course of maybe an audit situation, they would look at invoices or purchases by a business, and then determine from that. They don't go look at returns and say, that person should have reported use tax or not, because they have no way of knowing what you purchased until they reviewed something, or they get the information from another source or the county. Because basically, Arizona is voluntary tax compliant state, so they take at face value what's submitted.
But this is for purchases that are made by the state, which tax was not charged, right?
Correct.
Right.
Or unincorporated areas.
Right.
Absolutely.
Go ahead. No, I think my question was answered.
Are we at liberty to set the amount? Over 1,000, over 2,500, over 5,000? Are we at,
If you're aware that we currently have the two-tier rate for retail,
right?
and if you're adopting use tax, you would, based on your options, you would automatically have to have the same rate set for use tax. So it would be 1.2, currently in 2, over 5,000 would be 1.2.
Okay.
One
So
point
it has to mimic
It would
the
mimic,
current
correct, yes.
tax structure.
Correct.
Okay. Just seems to me in this day and age, $1,000 is kind of almost a nuisance in a low level of, I mean, I can't imagine how many, cameras are bought that are $1,000 that are in people's households, either camcorders or cameras or typical items. TV, you used a great example. I can't tell you how many people have bought, newer technology televisions online. It just seems like a nuisance, but okay. Oh well. $1,000 is $1,000, right? I mean, I can't.
One thing that was, I think that several of us would like to see is investigate the economic development impact on this. And I can see where our people, unless they ask the question, wouldn't necessarily know. Because X company coming in is going to talk to us about the negativities associated with moving into Goodyear. They aren't going to mention the advantages. Right. So we wouldn't necessarily know that this is important to them. But we've got West Valley Hospital with Brenda. We've got CTCA. We've got Amazon.com and Macy's. They now probably would be fairly honest in telling us whether or not that made a difference.
Don't forget, other longstanding manufacturers.
Oh, exactly. We have a sundry of those. So.
I think that is worth asking. Did it make a difference in their deployment decision?
Because it could be a negotiation tool now.
It certainly could.
I mean, $1 million you're talking
I
about.
mean, if you decided not
$1,000 tax.
to pass this, I'm saying that.
But it could also be something that if a company didn't even realize to ask, that we just point blank said, hey, by the way, did you know? That's just
I have a
another
feeling
part
they
of it.
all know.
Well, they could.
They
but-
do know.
Yeah, so.
You've got to write down to the dime. And don't tell the city.
They know.
Well, I think in big companies, the people that decide to move here, I usually get a call after they've decided from their tax department, wanting to go ahead and do this, and because obviously they wanted to pay it, and it just, we just didn't have a use tax.
And then we didn't have a business registration fee either.
Are we looking at,
We're
are we looking
we're
at,
so
are
nice.
We might, though.
Are they?
we looking at a bill right now?
What's that?
The 1403? The tax.
And where I live, I'll give you the example, in County Islands, at night, they have a neon sign that says no city sales tax, just flash them.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's the attraction to a car dealership is there's no city sales tax till they get to MVD and realize they got to pay it.
For the state, correct, yes.
Well, or if they're in a,
Well, you know what, they don't even have to pay it, because if they're in the county island, I mean, it's a privilege tax for the state anyway. It's a taxable transaction, so it's just, losing out on the use tax portion of it. And that's why they set it there.
250,000 equals how many employees?
3 probably.
And at best, obviously, it's it's a conservative number, I would say, new businesses and people, moving here, and actually the businesses coming in, so.
So one day it'll make a really big difference, is what you're saying, maybe not immediately.
It could possibly, yeah. At the state level, it makes a very big difference. I mean, it's huge.
Well, if we had people like Intel and so forth, Hewlett-Packard, in Fort Collins, what we had was a tiered use tax, so that purchases above $5 million, you paid no use tax. Purchases below the $5 million, so we were cognizant of the investment that the local businesses had to make in infrastructure, and there it was rather significant infrastructure. So, yeah.
can we add a third tier?
No. Any current language changes to the Model City Tax Code, any verbiage changes would have to go before the commission, Municipal Tax Code Commission. Before it does that, it has to go out to the Unified Audit Committee, which is representatives from the cities, and they need to discuss it and stuff like that. Right now, you'd have the 2-tier.
So you could shift the big ticket number.
You can change the dollar amount, correct, but it would have to be consistent between the two.
Where's that commission? Is that under the county? Is that under?
Municipal Tax Code Commission?
Haven't had a meeting in an awful long time, but yes, I attended a number of those.
Oh.
Yeah, there's a number appointed by the governor and President of the Senate and the House of Representatives. They appoint
But it's controlled by the state
by statute.
statute. Right.
Any other comments or questions?
Sales tax.
And if anybody have additional questions, if there's really, any further, if someone comes up and, says something, or you need clarification, but in the back of it is my email address, phone number, give you a business card if you need it.
I think, as Mayor pointed out, you're going to have to come up with some answers to the questions that have been brought to your attention today. That to me, is imperative.
We will.
That shouldn't take too long. Okay, good job.
Thank you.
Now, we can't begin until 6 because of the public hearing.
Oh, seriously? We posted it?
No, it's because of public
Yeah, I-
We advertised
I
it.
Trying
had-
to
I'm going to,
around that.
I thought maybe they just
Yeah.
forgot that I was on it.
There's one, I think,
I haven't heard from you since Carter left, so I don't know.
John's checking.
you know what, I used to supervise like 24 people. There's hardly anybody left. There's 0. There's one coming
Yeah.
up because they're trying to get some language together, but everything is.
so that's what
moving.
I'm checking on. But
Okay, meeting adjourned.
thank you.
Good.
I'd be able to just withdraw.